Of hatred about Islam. This is what they really are. They're not Christians. I've known real Christians with a heart of love of God. I mean, when you say a real Christian, you see these people, they're from a different planet. They're not Christians, that they are fanatics and fiends. They're not. Thank God I was a Christian. I've known real Christians. I've known monks and priests who are people of God, and I'm honoured to have known them. These are not like them. These are not worthy to undo their sandals to use a biblical metaphor.
Yeah.
Thank God I know that. Because if I didn't, I would just become a hate monk of myself for Christians. But I know better. These people do a disservice to your faith. Oh well. Oh well?
I didn't say I said well. I mean...
But I'm always, I mean, someone as intelligent and as impartial as Richard, I've wondered what has kept you away from Islam. You know, seriously.
Oh, you may tell.
كن سعيدا كن فريدا عش بفخر في الحياة لا تبالي فالمعالي بالتحدي لا سواه كن سعيدا.
If you're making a point that it's easier to accept for a non-Muslim, Bukhari.
What the scholars? Who are you talking about? The Muslims?
Lay people.
No, you're talking about it's the scholars.
I can't afford it, brother.
Absolutely not. I do always think that all back there. I mean, you're talking about scholars here, really, because the layman couldn't read or write.
Laity makes no difference to them. They don't even know. No, you're absolutely mistaken. The ulama, for as far as they're concerned, Bukhari, Muwatta, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi are all equal to them.
And Bukhari was very controversial in his own day and afterwards. His canon wasn't accepted by many people. This is an innovation. And so there's great controversy in the ulama about accepting this new idea of a Sahih collection. Who is Bukhari to innovate in this way? So this is what Brown says in his PhD on the subject. And he said the actual reception of the canon of Bukhari is itself an interesting history. And it wasn't straightforward.
No.
To be fair with Richard,
at first it wasn't, but historically it has been.
You know, Bukhari is given the title that it is the most authentic book after the Quran.
But ultimately it was received as such.
Yes.
But at the time it was very controversial. The Quran wasn't that controversial, but the Bukhari was because of the nature of it.
Exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
Again, this all goes back to what kind of Islam are we talking about? I was taught that classical Islam, you know, the Usul al-Fiqh, and within that is Ijma. And the ijma of the community came to be that Bukhari is incredibly authoritative in a way that Malik's Muwatta did not attain to that same level. So my point still stands,
your point stands,
in a discussion about what is Islamic teaching, which was your point earlier about terror, that was the point, It is therefore a valid approach to say, I'm quoting from Bukhari and Muslim, you're quoting from Malik's Muwatta. If they conflict in Islam's own terms,
I see your point. I agree with your point that Bukhari has more of an authoritative position than Muwatta as far as Islamic literati
the classical ulama
are concerned. Yes, you're right. I agree. Having said that,
just some water.
I can't.
It's Ramadan. Sorry.
It's okay.
Silly me.
Having said that, doesn't mean that Muwatta has less of authority, especially when it comes to authentic reports in Muwatta. There are weak reports in Muwatta. The reason why Muwatta never gained the status of Bukhari is because certain reports in Muwatta had been found to be weak.
Right.
In Bukhari, that's not the case. In Bukhari, scholars, the overwhelming majority believes that 100% reports in Bukhari with chains, reports that accompany chains, are authentic. 100%.
That's fine.
Not even 99%. Okay, so because of that, because there are certain reports in Muwatta that cannot be authenticated as Bukhari is authentic, that's why. But again, at the same time, there are reports in Muwatta. They are more reliable. They are more reliable.
Fine,
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Than Bukhari, because Muwatta's chain is shorter to the Prophet. You see the point? So the chain of Muwatta, Malik's chain, there are literally 2 people between him and the Prophet. Okay, so for that reason, when it comes to what is the golden chain in Islam? Do you know that?
Golden chain.
The golden chain of hadith. No, they call it the golden chain of hadith. It is Malik, Nafi, Abdullah bin Umar and the Prophet.
Okay.
Okay. So Malik's chain, if you were talking about Bukhari as a collection, its collection, no doubt, is more authoritative.
So you may well be correct that there are lots of sound hadith in Malik's Muwatta which are even more reliable than those in Bukhari. However, going back to the point earlier, if you go to a Muslim and say, here's a quote from Sahih Bukhari, almost without exception they will say, I accept it.
Yes, true.
That is not the case with the Muwatta.
True.
You can quote from Muwatta, as you did, and say,
and they will ask
here's
whether
a
it's
quote,
authentic.
And some Muslims might say no.
I agree.
Therefore, in that situation, it is actually a very
No,
valid
they will not.
approach
They
for
will
them.
not reject the report just because it's from Muwatta.
No,
They
no,
will
I
ask
know,
if it's authentic.
I know.
Yeah.
But there's the chance with the Muwatta that some scholars might say we don't accept this. That chance is much smaller / maybe not there with Bukhari. So if they're quoting a Bukhari report, it does have a firmer foundation than your quote of a Malik's Muwatta report. Unless you can convincingly persuade the audience why this particular saying in Malik's Muwatta should be accepted. Now, you didn't do that earlier. Now, don't get me wrong, you didn't have the time. They probably wouldn't understand if you tried.
Yeah.
However, from their perspective, it's very understandable why it's a better argument to use Bukhari than Muwatta.
No, I don't accept their perspective for the following reason. They simply have no idea what Muwatta is. They have no idea. They're completely ignorant about Malik and his Muwatta.
At least one of them,
and they were, as you saw, right? So for that reason, it is not possible to have a healthy academic discussion with such people. It's not possible. So you have to come down to their level sometimes to make them understand things. So this is why anyone who is well-read in Islam, even on the primary level, will know that Muwatta of Imam Malik is a primary text, very close to the Quran itself, and it's a very early text. And the fact that Muwatta is there and it's earlier than Bukhari shows that it, in some cases, in some reports, has more authority than Bukhari.
No one's disputing that. The point is, it's debatable whether or not it is in this case. At least unless you can tell me that pretty much everyone who has studied Malik's Muwatta has concluded that the tradition, the bit you quoted is reliable. That may be the case. Tell me if that's the case.
It is the case.
Great.
That report has never been disputed.
Great.
In fact, if you
that
look
would be a good point to tell them.
I mean, I was trying, of course. In fact, if you look at the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, for verse number 191 and 92 of Surah Baqarah, where he says, fight those who fight you, but do not transgress. وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا. Do not transgress limits. So what is transgression? Ibn Kathir brings this very report from Muwatta and explains as to what transgression is. You cannot kill women, cannot kill children, you cannot cut trees, you cannot destroy crops, you cannot burn beehives, you can't even kill animals unless you're going to consume them as food. Okay, so Ibn Kathir brought this as his source to contextualize or highlight as to what transgression is. So if you do one of those things, you are a transgressor. Basically, if you're cutting trees, you're burning beehives, you're destroying crops, you're demolishing buildings, you're killing monks, and you're killing women and children, you are a transgressor. You are condemned.
That's
absolutely.
Fine.
A terrorist, exactly.
That's fine.
Islam condemns women in Manchester, contrary to the lies of Jay Smith, who's a hate.
And I think, and I was, oh my goodness. And I'll say to your credit, I thought that you did give a very plausible interpretation of Sahih Muslim.
Yeah.
That is, they are of them. That is
you cannot avoid them.
It was among,
you cannot. This is what the Prophet was saying. That hum means they were among them.
Yeah.
So what could you do?
I think your interpretation is plausible. Though, yes. So that's
no, because the companions came disturbed. They came to the Prophet in a disturbed form. O Prophet of Allah, we saw women and children among the dead. Yeah. They were already shot. So why did they come to the Prophet? If it was okay to kill women and children, why would they come to the Prophet complaining about it?
Clearly at that point in the story they didn't know. And then it can go either, I'll let you get that.
No, don't worry about that. That's going to be long.
And then it can go either way. Either it could be your interpretation, which is Muhammad says, it's not good to kill women and children, but this is accidental. That's plausible.
Yeah.
Or it's plausible that although they initially were troubled, Muhammad said, "Don't worry, they're of them. You're allowed to do it."
No. That's what
I'm saying from my perspective. What I'm saying is you provided a good way to interpret that section without concluding Muhammad justified his actions.
I'll tell you why there is no other way of interpreting that.
Because of the other...
Thank you. The other categorical statements of the Prophet where he said, do not kill women and children. So that means he could not be telling them, you can kill them. That just doesn't make sense.
I agree. So from what I've seen, I agree with you.
Yeah. So
but even though Adnan has explained this to people, I've explained this to people, they'll still
come back with it.
They'll come back with the same lies because they do not listen and they don't care the truth because there's not a godly soul amongst them. They're just there to hate and defame. That's why I don't have respect for them. It's not like you disagree. That's fine. But these people will never learn. But you learn because your heart is different from them.
You'll probably end up defending us in front of them.
Well, he does.
You'll see, yeah, exactly.
And he gets attacked. I've seen it.
Yeah, he got attacked today.
Not physically.
They were calling him he's not a
Really?
Christian.
Again.
Godwin told him you're not Christian because you're
Godwin is a... Sorry, I'm going to say what it is. Not good if I say what it is.
No, because...
Waste of time. Why does anyone even talk to the guy?
You know, Richard, do you realize, that discussion I had with Godwin earlier where he just didn't know that David is a prophet in the Bible.
We should probably let that one go.
Choice moment. In Speaker's Corner history, that will go down as a choice moment.
But he's the one. He's the one who pulled it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
To your credit.
And you know what? If you read the comments,
Never lift it down.
No. But the benefit of that, in the comment section, when you go and read how Muslims are actually clearly stating that Richard is a very good Christian, is a truthful Christian.
This is
a good example of it.
No,
people are actually appreciating that there are people like you out there, and this is what shows the world that not all Christians are hate mongers like them. Amazingly, these missionaries actually are not doing a good job to represent Christianity, unfortunately. People like David, we had this discussion before, Sam Shimon, David Woods, this guy, I don't know what's his name, pure liars. I don't even hesitate, I don't even hesitate to call them liars. Yes, usually, you hesitate.
Well, that's actually being polite. Adnan's being polite. I think it's much stronger than that. Being a liar is a polite.
How does it help them to spread the gospel by lying about our faith? It's one thing to have a valid discussion to pin holes.
And we have 10 commandments, and one of them says, "Do not bear false witness against your neighbour." They're breaking the 10 commandments, let alone some obscure bit in the New Testament. The law, commandments of God, and the 10 commandments condemn them. And it's in the story.
Today, he read one of the verses that it states in the Quran that those who disbelieve from the people of the book and the polytheists will go to hellfire, and they are the worst of creatures. Okay, so I said, okay, hold on a second. You are the last person to ask me that question, because in the gospel, Jesus is calling people swines and dogs, right? So I pulled it out, and he goes, where does it say it refers to humans? Where does it say it refers to humans? If it refers to humans, obviously he's talking about disbelievers. Jesus is talking about
Matthew
people.
23 is full of right insults. I remember when I was at uni, actually.
23
and my New Testament teacher, he was very liberal. She was a liberal lesbian type, actually. She used to wear purple tracks. Anyway, we'll go into that. But she said, Jesus in Matthew 23 is an appalling, it's an appalling attitude. The way he rips into them and calls them this. This is not the Jesus that Christians believe in.
Yeah.
I thought, wow,
Yeah, he's certainly not meek and mild in 23, that's for sure.
Yeah, so if you do a comparison between the Quran, where the Quran is saying the verse of creatures, and when Jesus is calling people dogs and pigs, or swine, to be polite,
The only thing I would caution there is, he's not direct. He may not be directly saying, you're a pig.
He's not. We know that.
He's kind of giving an analogy, he's portraying a picture, which is, don't throw your pearls before swine. Now, this isn't literal, because they're not literally throwing pearls. So this is obviously some kind of pictorial language. Now, how that relates to people, you can discuss. Is he saying they actually are swine?
No.
And the only analogical bit is throwing the pearls?
He called a woman a dog in Matthew 15. He called a Gentile woman a dog.
Well, that's
so,
that's more direct.
But he calls her a dog.
So the point is, this is why
we were chatting Matthew 7:6.
When Christian missionaries come to us with questions, and then they pose questions like this, then we are shocked that these people have no sense of honor.
Double standards.
Double standards, no integrity, no integrity
like,
whatsoever.
It's like LIZZY has double standards. She criticises, she has this politically correct feminist secular view about women in Christianity. Christianity supports equal dignity. Judaism in itself is replete with statements about the subordination of women to men. And women not even made in the image of God.
She ignored everything.
And the double standards, hypocrisy that these Christians operate is absolutely astounding. And is morally culpable because it's so blatant. Now, you don't operate those double standards, but you cannot. People in glass houses should not throw stones. It's an analogy. You can't criticize Islam.
Or the kettle telling the pot you're black.
And we can speak in metaphors till the cows come home.
Yeah.
Get it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, LIZZY, and what they call complementarians in general will say, yes, there is a form of subordination where the woman, the wife submits to the husband, but that does not undermine equality. They're equal, but they have different roles within the household.
A woman cannot speak in the church, as in all the churches
right.
of God, because Adam, Eve sinned first. It's to do with the creation ordinance, the subordination of science of women.
Yeah.
It's not because of some fussy old women in a particular Corinthian church. It's a global,
so
universal
obviously
law.
Egalitarians dispute
no
that.
egalitarianism.
Complementarians don't dispute that. You're right.
That's what Paul says. They don't know about these disputes in the Christianity.
Well,
That's what Paul says.
I think what Paul says on this issue actually is a bit complex. I'm not actually decided.
You see,
so just to carry on speaking for 1 minute. So, but a complementarian would say, yes, there is submission. Functionally, the wife submits to the husband, but that does not undermine their fundamental equality and equal human dignity.
Well,
obviously, LIZZY is saying that in Islam, there isn't just difference in role. There is a fundamental difference in their, in their rights and their value. You would obviously dispute that.
Look at the Quran disputes that. Men and women are equal before God in their worth, but in their functions in society it's different. Paul says that women are subordinate to men and must not speak in the church, as in all the churches of God. And he says, what I'm saying you to is from the Lord, and if you don't like it, tough, he basically says. But this is ignored, and then this is standing on secular feminist principles, because these people are not really Christian, is my honest view. They are secular humanists with a warmed over, fuzzy bit of Christianity and a big dose of hatred about Islam. This is what they really are. They're not Christians. I've known real Christians with a heart of love of God.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say a real Christian, you see these people, they're from a different planet. They're not Christians, that they are fanatics and fiends. They're not. Thank God I was a Christian. I've known real Christians. I've known monks and priests who are people of God, and I'm honoured to have known them. These are not like them. These are not worthy to undo their sandals, to use a biblical metaphor.
Yeah.
Thank God I know that, because if I didn't, I would just become a hate monk of myself for Christians. But I know better. These people do a disservice to your faith. Oh well. Oh well.
I didn't say. I said well. I mean,
but I'm always, someone as intelligent and as impartial as Richard, I've wondered what has kept you away from Islam. Seriously.
Oh, you may tell if I got that question.
Because I would like to know what your core grievances against Islam are. What do you feel is the reason why you have not considered Islam as an option?
Well,
you're not Muslim yet.
I consider it as an option. It's not an option I've yet embraced.
Yeah.
In terms of why I'm not a Muslim, it's a number of reasons. Obviously, personal experience is one. I do believe as a Christian, I've encountered God in a transformative relationship. I believe I know God, and so of course, that's something that to me is persuasive.
Right.
I'd go beyond that and say, to me, I find good evidence that Jesus died, he rose again, he appeared to his disciples. I do find that the fundamental New Testament teachings about Jesus, his divinity, his death for sins, I do find that prophesied in the Old Testament, and therefore a fundamental harmony between the two. I've got my problems with Islam itself. I typically don't focus on moral issues here at Speaker's Corner, because I realise, we've got to be careful how we handle the Old Testament and women's rights in the New Testament, all those issues. That's too much of a grey area for me, so I don't go there. For me, I do think that the Quran affirms the Jewish and Christian scriptures as being reliable. It wants us to use those as the criteria for truth, even though, of course, our scriptures contradict those of the Quran. So for me, that's a big issue.
No, despite what we discussed earlier about
only today or another time.
The Quran giving authority to Jewish and Christian scriptures. We had this discussion.
We have, and I'm afraid I wasn't convinced.
You weren't? Okay.
No.
Okay, that's fine. So you do believe that the
that's
Quran...
still an issue for me, yes.
Okay, that the Quran does give authority to the scriptures, despite...
teaching that crucified Messiah, which the Quran then rejects.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right. So we all accept
It's a very
that
implausible idea, given what the legitimate teaches.
we all accept that the Quran contradicts the Jewish and Christian scriptures. A common Muslim response is to say, a common Muslim response is to say that the Quran cannot affirm the Jewish and Christian scriptures because it contradicts their teachings. I hear that a lot. If you're a Muslim who believes that the Quran is true, then of course your conclusion is it can't be affirmed in the form of scriptures. From a non-Muslim perspective, I can say that the Quran intends to affirm our scriptures, even though it actually contradicts them because it's wrong. It doesn't know what our scriptures teach.
The issue here ultimately is to do with the authorship of the Quran. We believing it's the word of God, we would naturally look for explanations. Oh, I see.
And I respect that.
That makes sense in terms of God knowing, obviously, but you believing it's a mere human product of a man in the 7th century are free to say things like that, which we could never say. So the authorship is the ultimate question here, and we find solutions within our understanding of the divinity of the Quran. You find solutions within your paradigm.
Of course, absolutely. But I would say that I'm open to either. I'm open to the Quran being the word of God. I'm open to it not being. I would say that the natural reading, it kind of goes back to 929. To me, the natural reading of these texts is that it does affirm our scriptures, even though it contradicts it, and that's why for me it's an issue. So it's not that I reject out of hand the possibility that there could be harmonisation, but that harmonisation is so unnatural to me that it's further evidence against the veracity of the Quran.
You see, part of the problem with your methodology, I think, in approaching this whole issue, is that it's a problem I constantly encounter today, and I always encounter this with Christians, is that Muslims will say, right, I want to know what Islam teaches. Let's look at the Quran. And that's the beginning and the end of the discussion. The Quran, Islam is what the Quran teaches. That's false. That's not Islam. That's a different religion called, Quran only. It's a heresy. It's not what Islam teaches. Islam teaches the Quran and the prophetic teaching. We look at the Quran through the lens of the prophetic teaching, plus the interpretation of the Quran, plus. So there is this complex interrelationship between them. So when you say what does the Quran teach, that is what we have to ask. That is how we do it.
Sure.
So when we say what does Islam teach about the New Testament and so on, we look at the Quran and how it's interpreted in the authentic hadith. Now, there are Bukhari hadith that directly address this very question, and I've shared these hadiths with you before, which say that the Christian and Jewish scriptures are corrupted. So when we have seemingly ambiguous verses perhaps in the Quran, which may or may not affirm corruption, textual corruption, or is it just interpreted corruption, we actually need to bring in Islamically the authentic hadith, and then we get the correct and fuller sense. So the Muslim position I think is irrefutable in that sense when looked at Islamically, and not where you separate out the Quran from the Sunnah, from everything else, which is what all the Christians down here do. It's a trick, because it's like where it says in the Quran, cut off the hand of the thief. And Lizzy did this to me earlier on. You believe this is the word of God? Yes. Are you sure? She didn't believe I was yes, it's the word, yes. And then I want to say, however, we interpret it, blah, 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 with all the caveats that come with the prophetic teaching. But she would not let me even say those words, because she has this paradigm to condemn Islam because of you take the Sunnah, you take Muhammad out of Islam. And you cannot do that. You must have them together.
You can't do that as a Muslim. Obviously, I'm not a Muslim. I'm trying to investigate Islam historically. And my historical investigation, which will include the hadith materials, though I'll weigh them against each other, weigh them against the Quran as a primary source. My investigations historically is that I think the Quran does affirm our scriptures. I'm aware.
Even historically, it doesn't work.
Okay, I think it does.
I have evidence that it doesn't, because Ibn Abbas, who cited the Bukhari hadith, is the most senior, one of the most senior, if not the most senior interpreter of the Quran by the Prophet Muhammad himself. We have his we know what he taught about the correct interpretation of the Quran. So he understood it as the apostles, Muhammad's own interpreter, in that way that Muslims understand it. Now you can say that Ibn Abbas was wrong. I mean, what you're doing is you're basically deconstructing the whole religion and say, well, okay, the senior companions who were told to teach about it, they got it wrong. Muhammad got it wrong. But I say in fact, by all that I think, as a non-Arabic speaker, English guy in 2017 in London, I know better than all that. This is implausibility on implausibility on implausibility. I will go with the senior companions whose job it was to teach the Quran. I will go with Muhammad taught, and fused together, we have the correct interpretation of those verses that you dispute. That's how I do it. That's my methodology. Your methodology is to separate all that out and say, well, to me in my English translation, it looks like that to me.
Do you take the prophetic tradition into consideration?
Yes.
So
let me just explain my position. So, Paul has shared with me this quote, this tradition via Ibn Abbas, which does indeed seem to suggest that our scriptures have been textually corrupted. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Ibn
From
Abbas,
what Ibn Abbas. From what I can tell, first
and plus others.
okay,
this is one. Yeah.
Let me just state my position.
Hudayfa bin Yaman, the compilation of the Quran under Uthman. What reason did he give? Put the Quran in one dialect before we start to dispute about our scriptures. It's like Jews and Christians did. So there are so many reports like that.
Yeah.
From my study, could be wrong, this is from what I've studied, both the Quran itself, the natural teaching does seem to be affirming our scriptures, and then most of the early Islamic traditions, with the exception of this one in Ibn Abbas quoted in Sahih al-Bukhari, the traditions before that pretty unanimously seem to suggest the widespread reliability of our scriptures.
What companions? Can you come with some Sahaba, please?
Yeah, so let me...
Are you...
So Gordon Nickel does
Gordon
a good...
Nickel, okay, I see.
Not just Gordon Nickel, but he does a good study of this early period.
Okay.
I'll see if I'm able to download it.
Yeah, we need that text, the exact report you're talking about, where
I mean, it's
Ibn Abbas
a number,
is contradicted, because as far as we know, not that Ibn Abbas is infallible, we're not claiming that. Ibn Abbas made mistakes at times. What we are talking about is that his view that the text of the Bible was textually corrupted is contradicted by or controverted by another companion. I'd be very interested.
So from what I've been reading,
Ibn Abbas says, quotes the Quran in this Bukhari negative. He's not just giving, I think they were corrupted. He actually then quotes the Quran and just some exegesis on it, and says, and this is what it means. So here we have Muhammad's own most authoritative interpreter of the Quran giving exegesis on the interpretation of it, saying that it's corrupted. That for a Muslim is good enough. For a Muslim, we can't gainsay Prophet Muhammad, who authorized this guy to speak. Because Muhammad knows.
And to us, there's no confusion on this point. We're not confused. Maybe it has another meaning. There's no such thing like that in Islamic literature.
Well, I mean, Muslim scholars have said that a lot of the early, Muslim scholars do not.
And what have they said?
They basically said that. I forget the exact quote.
The scripture of the Jews and
They
Christians.
basically say that the kind of the early Muslim understanding was, with very few exceptions, and I'm going to get on to that.
Ibn Abbas is not an exception. He's not. Ibn Abbas is not an exception. He is an authoritative spokesman.
I think Richard is referring to certain reports where the Prophet kissed the Old Testament.
But put it on a cushion. Put it on a cushion.
Yeah, exactly.
But we know these are daif. These are not reliable. We know.
If there is a direct report where a companion,
they're not a reliable hadith. They're not in the.
Even those, they don't actually.
I've looked into it, but Bassam Bazawi has done a great article on this. If you look at the Isnad and so on, it's very, very weak. These are not hadiths that are accepted as Sahih at all. They're very, very weak. They're not in.
So I don't really use that one very much.
No, but David Wood does, Jay Smith. They all.
That's fine.
Well, it's not fine. You say if you're doing, it's not fine to use bad scholarship.
When I say that's fine.
If you're having a discussion with someone, you wanted to.
I'll be back, guys. Carry on.
You guys carry on or?
Well, what's happened?
No, just a discussion.
We have a discussion here.
When I say that's fine, I'm not saying I approve of that. I'm saying, when I say that's fine, I'm saying I'm not making that point irrelevant to our discussion. That's what I mean by that's fine. I'm trying to brush it off.
Nice thing is just look it up here, yeah?
So all I'm saying, in terms of Islamically, we have our methodology which produces certain results. The Quran, as interpreted through the Sunnah, and the Prophet's own senior companions who are authorized to interpret it, that is the normative understanding. In the same way, I guess, although perhaps unfortunate analogy, but for you, Paul interprets the words of Jesus. Although I think he misinterprets the words of Jesus, because Jesus himself didn't go around preaching what Paul taught, but you believe that Paul correctly and normatively applies Jesus' teaching post-resurrection, post-ascension. So there is a, so you wouldn't, and you never allow me to separate these two out in practice. I've noticed that, because you say the New Testament stands and falls.
It depends how I'm arguing, yes. If I'm arguing how do I build my own theology, I read it all together. However, I am happy to often discuss with you on a historical level, wherein I won't assume Paul's reliability, I won't assume the Gospel of John's reliability, we'll talk about the synoptics, we'll talk about the historical Jesus. That's what I'm doing with Islam. I'm not talking about the Islamic methodology. I know the Islamic methodology on this issue. I'm saying for me as a non-Muslim, as a historian, wherein I'll accept some sources, reject other sources based on their reliability, I find this statement attributed to Ibn Abbas, not sure I accept that, because I know Western scholars often, they have doubts about the hadith. I find that outweighed by both the evidence from the Quran and the evidence from the other companions.
Well, I haven't seen any evidence from other companions you've shown me at all.
I'd say, so we haven't got there yet.
Because he is a companion. Ibn Abbas is a companion.
Sorry, I misspeak by companions. Early sources, early Islamic sources.
Well, I'm talking about the, the early sources. Ibn Abbas is the most senior companion authorized to teach the Quran in a Sahih report. So it has a very good isnad, a very good chain of narration. If you want to dispute that, you can. Well, no. To be fair, there are a number of Western scholars who would respect that as well. There's a range of views in Western scholarship. You can't just say the Muslim view. It's some Western scholars, obviously Jonathan Brown himself, who's written a PhD on this subject, would have a much more positive valuation than you do.
The Muslim view and some Western views. Yeah. However, because other Westerners are undecided on this, I'm not an expert. I do not at this point feel compelled to accept something, especially if it contradicts what seemed to me to be earlier sources.
You see, with respect, Richard, you don't read Arabic, do you?
No, though I do know many of the Arabic words that are relevant.
So, you know, we're talking about Arabs here who know their language, who know the Quran in the original language, not in translation, which is always, translation is, I forget the Latin phrase, but you betray the text by translating it. Translation is tradore, or there's a expression that's used. So the scholars who know this, in Islam, there tend to be four views on this subject, which I learned from a recent paper I read. You get four scholarly views on this question of the Christian scriptures and their status. But one is that one view held by some scholars is that the entire Bible has been corrupted. It's completely gone. The original Torah is gone, the original Injil is gone, the original Dawud, whatever, it's all gone. The next, another view held by more scholars is that yes, most of the Bible is in fact authentic, although there is some textual corruption there, but it's not massive. Another view is, and this is the smallest view, but it's still there, is there has been no textual corruption at all of the Jewish and Christian scriptures. So there's a range of views. The first couple of views together, we're talking about the overwhelming majority of Muslim scholars throughout history, having understood there has been corruption, because the Quran teaches that, but it's not such that the original Injil, the original Torah, is not understandable nevertheless. So there is actually dispute within Islamic scholarship about this. So there is room even for your view, if you like, Islamically, but it's not the majority view, and it never has been.
I think it may have been in the early periods, but I could be mistaken.
Well, but you say that, but I've never seen the evidence to that. I mentioned authentic hadiths, and the Quran itself teaches that. I know you disagree, but the Quran does teach that. You need to bring evidence to the contrary. I've not seen any evidence to the contrary.
Okay, that's because I keep getting about to show you Gordon Nichols' book. We don't get there because the conversation keeps moving on to a different point.
Well, I'll stand here and wait now.
Happy to do it. I don't know if I really got the energy. I'm going to head home fairly soon. It's probably just easier for me to refer you and the reader to Gordon Nichols' book, to be honest.
Well,
because Gordon Nichols
it's not fair to you to refer me to go and buy a book. I'd be nice if you could just show me. I'm not going to go out and buy.
It is fair if you're interested. If I'm saying that you're hard-hearted if you don't accept my logic.
No. There are other ways which don't
I don't have a burden to prove.
No. There are other ways to do this other than me going out and buying expensive books on your say-so. What you can do, if you've got the evidence, you can photograph it on your phone and you can send it to me on Facebook. Just send it through Messenger, yeah? So you just send it to me on Messenger. I'm not going to go out and buy a 60 quid academic book. I want to see...
It's about 15, 20 quid, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd like you to show me the evidence. I'd like you to photograph, if you've got it in a book or on a website or something, just photograph it and just send it to me. It won't cost you a penny, it won't cost me a penny.
Could violate copyright, but yeah.
Copyright doesn't apply for this kind of thing. I have a copyright apply on private communications via Messenger. It's only if we're publishing it. Do you know that? There's also fair use as well. Of course.
I've not heard of that before.
You've not heard of fair use before?
Fair use I've heard of, yeah.
But private communications by email, you can't copy?
No, I think you couldn't. Because that would violate, because the point of copyright is to protect the intellectual property, so people still have to buy the product.
Right, but parking that aside, are you going to send me this evidence, or are you going to have a copyright issue with that?
I don't know, I'll have a think about it. Or I might come back here and we can discuss it another time.
Okay. You can't show me the book then, because that's violating copyright, isn't it? Or...
I don't think it is to show it. I think if you take a copy of it, that's different from showing.
Okay, I don't have any of these qualms. It's fair use. If you use this fair use, it's covered in recognised English law, American law, European law.
There is fair use. Fair use has its limits.
Yeah, but we haven't reached any limits. We haven't done anything yet.
Well, no, but if I send you a few chapters, that could be violated. So I think fair use may limit you to one chapter.
Look, I don't want chapters of a book. I want you to send me reports of the companions. That's all I want, because that's what you allege contradicts Islamic teaching.
As I said earlier, I misspoke by companions. I take that back. I'm saying early Islamic sources.
Which are which ones?
I'd have to look it up. I don't remember off the top of my head. This is something I studied months ago. Came to a conclusion. That's now my position until I study it again, basically.
Okay.
And allow me to more clearly state my position, because I may have overstated it unintentionally. From my understanding, so as I said, I think that the Quran itself teaches that our scriptures are not corrupted at all, textually. The earliest Islamic sources, up until Sahih al-Bukhari, I think were saying that, broadly speaking, they weren't corrupted. The only exceptions kind of listed being specific prophecies about Muhammad in the Torah at the time of Muhammad. So this wouldn't include corruption before Muhammad, this wouldn't include corruption by Christians, and this wouldn't include corruption that's not about Muhammad. That is my perspective up until the time of Sahih al-Bukhari.
معنا نهج حياة جئنا تبصرة عن كل ضلال أعددنا بضع رسالات تحمل نورا للأجيال معنا نهج حياة جئنا